Day one and all. This is Phil Martin from the University of York, and it's the TELSIG podcast. Guest today is Peter Davidson. Peter teaches business communication and technical communication at Zayed University in Dubai. Peter's a familiar voice within the Balit community, and he's previously presented at TELSIG's AI Lightning Talks, and he'll also be speaking at the upcoming Balit Professional Issues meeting, which is hosted by the University of Leeds. That's almost upon us, or at the time of recording anyway. I'm not sure when this podcast will drop now, but that meeting is happening on Friday, 19th of June. And the theme for the day is EAP and the Academy in the Age of Gen AI, implications for practices and practitioners. So there's lots of really great looking talks on the agenda there, and it was really nice to see some familiar names as well. So links to registration forms will be in the show notes for that. So hopefully many of you can make it. Today, Peter and I talk about the importance of human skills in a world increasingly dominated by AI, and this was inspired by a 2023 New York Times article by David Brooks. We'll look at how well that's aged and how it informs the way Peter teaches and how he approaches these topics with his students. So without further ado, I bring you Peter Davidson.
All right, so the context is quite large. So we've got generative AI, and generative AI is AI that generates text and images and video and sound, music. And I think as teachers, we're getting quite good at using generative AI and as a tool. Students are getting quite savvy at using it as well. I was at the IELTS conference in Brighton the other day, and I think it was the fifth IELTS conference I've been to in Brighton. I love Brighton. And it was really interesting. There was about over 50 talks about AI, and they all focused on generative AI, and it was good. People were talking about pedagogy and collaborating with AI, and it was all good. But it was all about using tools, and I think we need to move away from AI literacy and the ability to use tools, and look at if AI can create all these texts, what do we do? And then of course there's agentic AI, which is it's not fully being fully developed yet. It's not that widely used. But AI agents are being used. So agentic AI is AI doing stuff for us, and it's autonomous. So it'll do things for you without you even asking it to do it. So it'll sell your car. It'll sell your Toyota Corolla, Phil, and it'll buy you a nice lime green Lamborghini because you've been complaining about your Toyota Corolla, or it will get a new job for you. It'll act autonomously. So agentic AI, the autonomous element hasn't really kicked in yet, but AI agents are still doing a lot of tasks. And it's this that I think people are worried about losing their job, because AI is going to do all these tasks that humans do. And, so at the moment, people are using these AI agents to, book flights, book hotels, book a whole holiday, teach your class. So it's being these AI agents are being widely used. So if generative AI generates all these types of text and images and sound, and then we've got agentic AI or AI agents doing all these tasks for us, I think one of the key questions left is, what's left for us? What do we do? And do we want to just become passive and let AI do all of these things for us? So I think for me the answer is no. We got to keep our humanness. We want to stay human, and keep our agency. Keep being active. I don't want to become a robot. And I mean, you're probably aware of this, Phil, that people are beginning to. There's studies that show that people are beginning to sound like ChatGPT. And, use all the language of ChatGPT and sound structurally like ChatGPT. And people are beginning to think like ChatGPT. And I've had students hand in assignments and go, "Did you write this?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "Really?" And they go, "Yeah." So I said, "It sounds like ChatGPT." And they go, "It's funny you mention that, because everyone says that about my writing, because I think I'm, very influenced by ChatGPT," and they are.
Yeah.
So this is this whole reason for this importance of humanness, to remain human, to find our role, to not become just passive users of this technology and have our jobs taken over. So I think it's important to identify what's left for us. So this leads me, if I can I read the David Brooks quote,
go for it.
Which got me into this. David Brooks wrote in 2023 in a New York Times article, he wrote, AI will force us humans to double down on those talents and skills that only humans possess. The most important thing about AI may be that it shows us what it can't do, and so reveals who we are and what we have to offer. So I think that really struck me when I read that, and I thought, this is, I've been focusing on AI tools and using it in class, and I haven't been focusing on what the implications of this and what I really should be focusing on in class, which is developing my students' human skills. So, which led me to create this list.
Mm. When I read that quote, the thing that I've been thinking about more recently is not so much what we can do. And when I talk to my students, it's not necessarily clinging on to the things that I think humans are better at, because that's going to be like an ever retreating object. AI or machine learning has been better at many things for a long time, and that list is going to keep growing. Whatever it is that we thought is going to be the last bastion of human ingenuity that AI can't possibly replace, tomorrow it's going to be, we'll find it can. We used to think that AI couldn't write reflectively, it couldn't, be creative. And so is the question more about not necessarily what can we do that AI can't do? It's what do we value in retaining human authorship? Chess, although computers have been able to beat us at chess for a long time, we still have human competitions. We want to see humans play chess. There are still tournaments with vast sums of prize money that are human, even though we know that AI is better at us than chess. We're interested in what we can do and seeing human ingenuity and skill. So what do you think are the kind of areas where what will we value, I guess, is my question, less than what can we do. AI can write amazing music, and this is something I thought maybe we could touch on as well. I've been following the music debate as well, with Spotify pumping out its AI-generated playlists. I don't think we're seeing some pushback on this, and we're seeing people really think. You look at polling data. Do people want to listen to AI music? Do they want to know what's human-made versus AI-made? And the answer is a strong yes. We do. We value what other people can do. So what's your take on that versus, what can AI do?
Yeah, to go back to this music and the creativity thing, I mean, it's whether or not people want to know, because they often don't know if it's AI generated. And, people often say, well, AI is not creative because it's just, amalgamating all these different things that exist. And it's just amalgamating it and coming up with something that, it's like a remix. But I don't know. I kind of think that's what artists do, and that's what musicians do. I don't think. I mean, I have a bit of a background. I did a major in English literature, and I also majored in the philosophy of art theory. And we were looking at the whole concept of what is art, and this was 40 years ago. But this whole concept of of creativity and originality, artists. The history of art is just a history of reaction to what people have previously done before, and all artists are massively influenced by other artists and everything that went before, whether it's to react to it or to add to it. So the whole art is a remix, and music's a remix. So this idea of is AI creative? I would kind of argue that it is in a similar way that humans are creative, that they remix what they see and they synthesize it and they come up with what they feel is their take on it. But I mean, personally, the whole thing about what do people value, what do people want. That's kind of what I was trying to get at in the beginning. Like that I've created this list of these key capacities, I think, because, and one of them is creativity. That's the first one. It's on, if you look at the lists of everybody who looks at, what are the key things that, we need to do to remain human, and creativity is on everyone's list, along with critical thinking and curiosity and communication. They're on everyone's list. And I think we need to become more creative. I think maybe it's going to be more important for everyone than it was before, because before we kind of left it to the creative types. But I think now everyone has to be a bit creative, because that's one of the capacities that we need to develop, and we can do that AI, might struggle with or might not see things in the same way. So I think we sort of still need to be, we don't want to just, my worry is that because AI starts doing everything for us, when agentic AI kicks in, and I don't think that's going to be very far away, that, we just get lazy, because people are lazy, and people are just going to go, well, AI can book my holiday for me, and, AI can, book my hotel, instead of going to booking.com and searching through and spending an hour looking yourself. People will just get lazy and passive. And my worry is that, human nature will be just to let it take over. So my point is that we really need, and I agree with you, that we need to make sure that we remain agentic.
Yeah.
That we are active, that we are responsible, and we have agency over the things that we do. I think that's really key.
So let me just, I think I'm sorry I derailed you with that massive, overly wordy question, but but just to back up a little bit to a point you just said, so you put that list that you started there, and you had creativity heading that list of things that we want to retain. Was that the sort of thing you were thinking of when you're looking at the Brooks quote about the things that we should double down on that only humans can do?
I think when we say the only things that humans can do at the moment, because, who knows, but I think a lot of the things that are on my list, I think AI can do them, but I think we need to be able to do them as well to remain human. Do you get my point?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that AI can do, but we need to do it as well, because in order to remain human, because that's to ensure our humanness remains, because that's, my worry is that we're all going to turn into passive robots that just accept stuff. And, when you think about it, I mean, ChatGPT's only been around not even 5 years, and it's not even 4 years old, and the impact that it has had on students cognitively offloading assignments and thoughts and thinking. And, we used to brainstorm on a piece of paper, and now we call brainstorming ideation, and we get ChatGPT to do it. And it's not just students, it's teachers. I mean, I was creating an assessment 3 or 4 months ago, and, with a group of teachers, and for a technical communication course, and we have a scenario. It's a scenario-based assessment. And one of the teachers defaulted straight to ChatGPT and said, "Hey, let's get ChatGPT to do it." And I was like, we can't do that. That's what students might do, but surely we've got to brainstorm first and give something for ChatGPT to work with. Do you know what I mean? Like, for it to be the default is dangerous. So,
Well, I think definitely that's when I talk to my students, it's so the reason I was so interested to see how you present this to students and what you prioritize is because I'm kind of doing a similar thing with my as an adjunct to my EAP teaching. I'm doing AI literacies strand, which I know has become a bit of a cliche. So I think when we have these discussions, it's really important to think about what do we mean by AI literacy? What do we ask students to prioritize? And like you say, one of the things that's on my list is why might I not reach for ChatGPT in the first instance, even though I know it might be able to do a task better, probably can do a task better than I can. So I had a look at the Brooks quote that when I read the Brooks article, he's sort of saying that the prose sounds very empty. It doesn't sound, I can spot GPT writing quite quickly. And I think this was a way of saying that ChatGPT's writing is not as good as humans writing, and it lacks soul. Was that something you'd sign off, or do you think that's sort of not aged particularly well over the last 3 years?
I'm just not sure. I don't know if my students' writing has soul. I mean, it's I teach technical communication, and it's students writing instructions. Instructions don't really have soul. They have to be mechanical. We're not talking, essay writing or something or literature. But yeah, this idea of AI literacy is really important, because students need to be able to understand how to use AI responsibly. And at the moment, a lot of students are just defaulting to AI and thinking that it's actually okay. So I caught a couple of students misusing AI the other day, and I gave them a 0 because it was just so blatant. And it had things like make sure you add a table here or a diagram here. I mean, it was just so obvious. And I ran it through what's it named, GPT-0, and it was 90% likely machine produced. So, but the students were adamant, because they had worked with different drafts of the AI and said, no, that's not kind of what we do. Do it again, do it again, do it again. But I had to say, what was your input? How did you, I'm looking at all your prompts, but did you give it any input? Did you say, this is the kind of thing I want you to do? Like for the way I'm working with AI these days is I'll have an idea. And so, for example, I'll use this talk as an example. Once I read the Brooks quote, every now and then I'd come across somebody, somebody who would have a list of really important human skills that students need to know. I came across a really good one yesterday by Salman Khan from the Khan Academy. And there was an article that he's developed a new university called the Khan TED Institute. Have you heard about it?
I've not, no. Okay.
And it's really interesting. For him, he identified the need, as AI takes over people's jobs, he identified the need for durable skills. And I'd never heard of that before, this idea of durable skills. And he had communication, collaboration, and creativity as the three key skills that students need to learn. And his whole, they're offering 4-year degree. It's competency based. So once if you know a lot already, you don't have to keep learning things that you already know. It'll figure out what you don't know, and you'll get lessons on that. And it's pretty cheap. And it's a 4-year degree. So it looks really interesting. And it's they're in partnership with Google and Microsoft and Accenture, who input into what they want the courses to be, which I think is really interesting, that industry is telling this university, this course, the people that are developing it, we want this to be in this course. We want this. We want you to teach students this, this, and this, which I think is really, really interesting. So that whole, I forget why we were talking about, I was talking about Salman Khan. But anyway, he the idea that he came up with this list, and I was just looking at it going, yeah, they're all on my list too. We were talking about students' AI literacy, and I forget what. Well,
it was about really how do we talk to students about why we might not reach for ChatGPT or any AI in the first place. I think that's where we started, and I was a couple of points that you've made so far are just flag, because I think detection, I'm not sure. I was reading the other day that these AI detectors are still in use. I to be honest, I thought it was pretty much in agreement that they're not tools that we can rely on. The GPT-0 or whatever it is we're looking at, they're giving all these false positives. I think detection, if we're relying on the ability to detect what students have done, then we're going to just run out of road, because even if it is detectable now, we might be able to see some of the red flags that we've come to associate with AI writing. This is going to change so quickly that it's going to become harder and harder to separate what's their writing from GPT assisted or GPT produced. without getting into assessment at the moment, just on the topic of how we talk to students about this. So, okay, collaboration, communication, and creativity. So these are the things that we are identifying as things that we want to nurture in the students and convey the value to them before we get to policing, before we start talking about enforcement. They understand why these are important and that these are the durable, transferable skills we want students to take with them.
Yeah, I mean, no, I totally agree with you about being the AI policeman. I mean, that, to be honest with you, that was the first time in 4 years that I've used an AI detector. I used it because I knew it might impact the students. When they saw it, they might go, "Oh, okay," because they might not be so savvy about the limitations of AI detections. And the reality is, they just don't work. And students can pass it through human eyes is where it will pass detectors anyway. So yeah, my purpose for that wasn't to check, because I don't check, but it was just so blatantly obvious. But my point was because the students were adamant that it was their work, and I couldn't find a sentence that they had produced. And I said, well, show me a sentence that you wrote. And they were like, well, that one. I mean, no, you didn't write that. It was obvious. And so it wasn't sort of to play detective. It was just kind of that whole ChatGPT 0 was to add a little bit. But yeah, I think, like, going back to my full list, I've got 5 main things on my list. Okay. I've got creativity. I've also got cognitive capacities, which is about how we think and how we identify bias, and I've also got the human and social capacities, which I think are really important. And then I've also got the adaptive and interpersonal capacities, which I think, how we grow and how we remain human and agentic. I think maybe that's the most important part of the list, actually. And then there's the AI-related meta-capacities, like, AI literacy and meta-literacy. So I think collectively, because you may think, what's the point of creating another list? I mean, there's already a lot of really good lists out there. I think on the reference list I gave you, the first 2 are really, really good lists of what human skills we need to have. But for me, it's human to create lists, and I want to, I create a list for my context, because the lists that I was seeing weren't specific enough and didn't fit with what I was doing. So I wanted to create my own list, and so what I did was I came up, after reading that quote. This is how I worked with ChatGPT. One morning I got up. It was the 28th of February, because I remember that day. And so I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning. It was a Saturday, and I had a list of 17 attributes that I think we need to teach students that to remain human, that are important. And so I fed that into ChatGPT, and I said, I've got this list, and I'm giving this talk, and I'm thinking about, and it's for these people, and then ChatGPT came up with some quite nice categories, a little bit different from what I just read out, the 5 categories that I've said there. So until about from 7 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was working with ChatGPT, going over the list, adding to the list, brainstorming with ChatGPT. It was coming up with ideas. It was sparking new ideas in my head. So we were collaborating. I felt there was a collaboration going on there. And for me, that's quite a nice way to work with it, rather than just saying, come up with a presentation that's 45 minutes long about this topic, which it'll do, and it'll do a fine job. But I've got no input. So I think that's the way I think, we need to teach students to work with AI as well, collaborating with it. However, I do teach an EAP writing course for first-year students. And one of the assignments, they write a paragraph and they do a presentation. So I get them for the instructor points, which is worth 10%. I get them to write an essay. I get them to turn their presentation into an essay. To ensure that they do the thinking and the outlining and the brainstorming, I do that in class on paper. I bring paper and pencils to class because they don't have that. And I get them to brainstorm in class, and that brainstorm is worth 10% of the grade of the essay. So I've got this framework that I've worked out to make sure the students do the thinking. They don't outsource everything, so that I can see that they're actually doing it. So they'll start brainstorming topics, and then they'll get stuck. And I'll go for a wander, have a wander around, or talk to your friends about it, see what they think, But don't go to ChatGPT yet. Wait, So, we'll spend an hour doing this brainstorm, and then they'll get stuck, and they'll go off, and they'll wander around, and they'll come up with a pretty decent brainstorm, and I'll mark that in class as I go around. And then I say, right, the next stage is run that by ChatGPT, and then see what it comes up with, and see if there's any things that you thought that it came up with that you didn't think about, which inevitably it will. And then I get them to write a reflection. So that input from ChatGPT is not worth any points. But then I get them to write a wee reflection on the ChatGPT feedback and input. So they write, well, I like these two ideas. It came up with some other ideas which I didn't like. This idea sparked off another idea. So they write this reflection about how they're going to use this AI feedback and input, which I think is a really important part of AI literacy and meta literacy. Actually, it's being judgmental, it's being it's being evaluative and checking for bias and making sure that things fit. And it's a really good way. So we do that for the outline, and then we do that for the brainstorm, and then we do that for the outline as well. And then they write a first draft on the computer, but without AI help. And because they've got a decent brainstorm and a decent outline, they're almost more likely, I think, to carry on writing it because they've developed this topic and these ideas, and they're going to write a first draft. So, and then if there's sources involved, they might get AI to find sources for them and evaluate. They'll evaluate the sources, etc. But this use of reflection, I think, is really key. And 3 girls came up to me at the end of the first lesson and said, we've been at this university for 1.5 years, and you're the first person to ever ask us what we think and to get our ideas. And I was like, well, that's good, but it's also really bad. It's good that, I did it, but it's really bad that in 1.5 years, no one has asked you, what do you think? And gosh, isn't that the whole purpose of why we're at university, why students are at university, to get them to think for themselves, to develop their thinking, to learn how to learn. So that was quite an eye-opener.
Well, you'd hope, right? Just to go back to your point about lists, I think, what do I want students to get out of this? If I'm going to talk to them about AI and AI literacy, like what does this actually mean? And what do I want students to be able to take out from this and be a durable lesson? I mean, one of the things I teach, which I think seem to be at the core of what you were just saying there about this, work with a pen and paper. If you get stuck, go out, walk around, talk to a friend. I mean, using pen and paper I found really beneficial. Having some digital detox time in class is, unplugging for a set period of time is hugely valuable. But at the core of it was this idea of embracing difficulty and embracing friction. And I think when you look at some of the sort of the promo material for AI educational tools, they'll do things like streamline your work, never start with a blank page, overcome writer's block. And you're thinking, but yeah, I know these things feel bad in the moment, but they're absolutely vital. If you're eliding the friction, then you're not developing in any sort of meaningful way. This is how the learning happens. This is how we transfer knowledge from short-term into long-term memory. This is how we build skills. This is how we build these physical traces in our brains, these neural connections, is through the strain and through the difficulty. So there's a section on that, like spend a fair amount of time talking to students about this idea of not reaching for, because I get it. You probably get the same thing. I mean, when you're learning a language or something, the temptation to reach for a translator or the temptation to immediately see what ChatGPT might give you is a strong urge, right? And I think students feel that more than any of us. I mean, that was just my way of saying I agree with the lists, and I think that for me, that's top of the list is what's changed about the way we talk to students about learning and the way we talk about what do we value, difficulty and strain and struggle in like going back to what you're saying earlier. If we want to hang on to creativity, we need the struggle, right?
That comes under number 4 on my list. I've called that adaptive and intrapersonal capacities, and I'll just quickly read off some of them because I think it summarizes everything you've just said. The first one is curiosity, and a lot of the lists that I've looked at about essential human skills talk about curiosity, and I don't remember ever kind of reading or thinking about that before in terms of teaching. Students, I just thought students had it. That's why they're here. They've probably got a certain degree of intelligence, and that means they're curious. But it comes up in just about every single list as being one of the key things. And it's this idea of having intrinsic motivation and having an exploration mindset of being curious about what's happening and exploring different things. The next one in this list is adaptability and agility, and I think that's really important. The ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, which is really hard to do, especially for older people. And openness to change is really hard. And then the next one I think you'll like is resilience and grit. And this idea of grit and persevering, and it's a struggle. It's a productive struggle. And this idea of delayed gratification. Yes, you could get the answer straight away, but by delaying your gratification and struggling and working on it yourself, that's the struggle is, and the perseverance under uncertainty. That's how we learn, and tolerating this, the cognitive friction about, all these people are saying different things, and I'm getting all confused about it. I remember when I was a student, this guy said this and this guy said this. Like, who do I believe? It's that, and related to that is this idea of deep reading stamina. I mean, I'm really worried that students don't read much, and they at all these days, in terms of academic text. So forget about deep reading stamina. I mean, surface reading stamina would be good to have. But I think, we need to say, no, you've got to read this. I'm not going to, you could get ChatGPT to summarize it into 5 bullet points and you got all the points. But reading it is going to make you understand it in a different way. So there's that. And then there was tolerance for ambiguity and courage. And the last one on that list is agency and self-authorship, taking ownership of learning and understanding why you're at university. And you've said you have conversations with your students about that. I do too, like very early on. Why are you here? Yeah, you could get the answer from ChatGPT straight away. And sometimes students do, and I go, amazing answer. ChatGPT came up with that, yeah. Did you learn anything from that? No. Okay, so if you just keep going to ChatGPT all the time to get answers, are you going to learn anything? Why are you here? And it's, I don't know. I don't think you can get the message across to everybody, but I think a lot of students do come to university because they want to learn. And I've met students who do not use AI at all. And one of the reasons, one of my daughter's friends, she just graduated from Nottingham last year. I wanted to chat to her because my daughter said she doesn't use AI. So I wanted to find out why. And she said, well, first reason is I don't want to be accused of cheating. And so I don't use it. And number 2, I came here to learn myself and I want to do it myself. And I don't need a machine to tell me, to help me at the moment. I want to do it myself. So I thought that's kind of interesting. Now that you've graduated and you're going to start working, are you going to use AI? And she said, oh, yeah, absolutely. But it was really interesting that she had a really solid awareness of why she was at university, what her purpose was and how she was going to get there, and wasn't even going to use it just to polish the grammar. No, I'm going to not use it at all. So that's interesting, but it creates a really uneven playing field when it comes to assessment. And you go, well, I know the students used AI 95%, and this students used AI 5%. How do you mark that in terms of leveling playing field? It's really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sort of links to a few conversations we've had on the last few episodes of this podcast. Is about the value sometimes of curating the technology and setting limits around it. because yes, AI is everywhere, but that doesn't mean that it's, it has facility in the classroom or in teaching, and the ability to unplug sometimes and just, work through these pain barriers yourself. We know that's rewarding. And I think a lot of this sits on, I don't know if this is a paper that you refer to in your, when you talk to students. I think there have been various labels, but the idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and these are the things that we value, more than simply extrinsic rewards. It's the intrinsic factors which we want to hang on to. This is why I talk to the students about this, and it's a paper that we look at, and why when you look at the Wall-E dystopia, have you seen the movie where everyone's just like wheelchair bound through inactivity? Why does that not appeal to us? Why do we view that as a dystopia? Why is it seen as undesirable? Because there's a recoil when you watch that scene of everyone just being pushed around in their chairs and slurping, blue and red Slurpees. We recoil because we recognize that it's a sort of a life void of any sort of intrinsic purpose. So it sort of illustrates to us that these are things that we want to hang on to, and that we value. And I think, talking to students about this is so important, because the extrinsic factors so often overshadow. When we think about our students, they probably are curious, they are motivated internally, but there are so many external factors pushing them. They need to get good grades. Education is so expensive, they can't afford to fail. Have you looked at the intrinsic motivation theory? What's your sort of literature that you rest your teaching on here?
I haven't come across that per se, but just going back to the Wall-E movie, have you seen the movie Surrogates starring Bruce Willis?
No.
Oh, it's the human version of Wall-E, and it's like all the humans, like, they just lie on these beds in their dressing gowns, unshaven, and their AI robotic self, which is young and good looking, will run off and experience life. But they just sit there, and because they're all hooked up to the sensors, they feel what the robot feels. And it's that, but a human version of it. It's really, really interesting, because I remember watching that film. I forget when it came out. I remember when it first came out, and everyone was laughing at it, going, "Ha ha ha!" That's crazy. But actually, now it's not that far away. It's a possibility within our lifetime that things like that will be possible. But yeah. So, what was your original question about that one again?
So there's a brief theory that I've read about intrinsic motivation. It's like studies of from lab-based experiments looking at kind of from a psychology point of view. It's back to this question of what do we value? What do we want? In a world where we can produce images, text, music, audio at the click of a button, why do this ourselves? And I think, like, to me, this is a key question that we need to get. If we're going to talk meaningfully about AI literacies, it's this question of what do we value? Why not farm out everything to AI? And it's a tricky question to answer, right? It's tricky for us to think about. Why not? Why is it valuable to have human authorship? Why is human creativity important? And I think, like, having time so this is why, for me, like, an AI literacies class is sort of like you're saying, it's sort of less about tool familiarity. We'll do a bit of work on Notebook LM, sure, but the point of the class is to think, well, why would I not stuff everything into Notebook LM and auto-generate a PowerPoint presentation?
I actually start off with I ask students how they use AI, and then I ask them why they use it that way, and then I ask them how they misuse it, and they're really honest. It's quite interesting. And then we'll look at, there's a lot of reasons that, they're a little bit confused about what the AI policy is of the university, or this course, or this major that they're majoring in. Is how much help is too much. And, students are doing, they're majoring in graphic design. They're getting massive amounts of help from AI. How much? That's my next talk with AI. How much is too much? And I just don't know the answer to that question. So I've got 2 months to come up with an answer about how much is too much, and when do students, the idea that if AI can do everything, what's the point of us doing it? And I think that's kind of the point of what I'm getting at with this with this idea of, remaining human. I think it's an intrinsic human nature to be curious, to want to experiment, to want to learn, to want to travel and explore and try new things, and be creative. And I think it's an intrinsic human characteristics, and I think we need to keep nurturing that. And I think more so now than before. And there may come a time in the future where we have a huge amount of spare time on our hands because we don't need to work, and that might come about sooner than everybody realizes. And so I think in that case, I tell my girls, all your hobbies that you're interested in, your art, your literature, your music, keep that going. Even though you're an engineer and one's a lawyer, keep that going, because in the future, that might be all you have.
Yeah.
You might be doing that. You might have a lot of time to spend on that because you don't really have to work much. So that's kind of my take on it. But I think going back to what you were talking about, I think you were talking about some really interesting AI meta-literacy skills there, about reflecting on when to use AI and when not to use it and why they're using it rather than just using it as the default. Regulating your reliance on it. And a lot of students really rely on it a lot. Adapting practices. So, it's kind of, they've got to figure out, what does this teacher expect? Because it's not a university-wide thing. It's not a college thing. It's maybe not a course thing. It's this teacher. What does the teacher expect for this assignment? So we've got to make it really clear, and whenever I have an assignment, sometimes I teach business communication, and they write a report, and I go, okay, which parts of this report are you going to get AI to help you with? And they decide. And they go through and they collaboratively, they all decide, and I go, okay, so these other bits, you're going to do those bits? And they go, yeah, we don't think AI can do that very well anyway. And I go, okay, go ahead and do it. So, it's kind of, figuring out when to use it, how to use it, making sure that there's integrity, that there's still learning integrity going on, that they are, responsible and fair. It's all key. It's all part of meta literacy as well as AI literacy, which I think is what you're doing on your course.
Yeah, I mean, I'll ask you. Where we're hurtling towards the hour, so I'll ask you a couple of on the ground questions in a sec. But just to round off that last point, I mean, I think how much is too much. If we're waiting for this bright line to appear, I just don't think there's not going to be a bright line. I think we're not going to be able to identify, that is over reliance. This side of the line is okay, but it's so messy and so complex, and we're not going to be able to disentangle it. So I think it's sort of recognizing that every time we can farm whatever we like out to AI, but whenever we do, it's a trade-off. And the students need to understand that, and we need to understand it as well, because I don't think teachers are that much. We're all thinking this through at the moment as well, right? What do we need? What do we want to hang on to? But yeah, so give us some idea. I should have started with this question actually, but what's the actual structure of your course? What does it make up? Is it an EAP course, and where are you going with it in the future?
Okay, so the main course that I teach is called Technical Communication, and it's in the IT college, and it's basically technical writing. So it's students learning to write. We start off with emails, professional emails, business correspondence, because they don't do the business writing course. And then we move on to writing a report, because they spend a lot of time report writing. And we have this throughout the course. We do a scenario based assessment. So there's the same scenario. We imagine that they work for a company, or this semester they work for a government entity. And one of the things in the UAE that the government is getting companies to do, government organizations to do, is integrate AI and make things more efficient, better public service, etc. And so that's a real thing. So we incorporated that in and said, okay, this is you work for this organization, you're in this department, the government's asked you to come up with ways to integrate AI into the workplace, make things more efficient. So that's the scenario, and it runs through the whole thing. So they do a report about that. So they come up with 3 different AI tools, and they compare them, and they create a criteria how to compare those tools. So it's kind of difficult for AI to do this. I mean, it wasn't the reason that we developed this assessment, because we developed it 10 years ago, but it was just a way. We weren't thinking about we want to make it AI proof, because you can't really make any assessment AI proof unless they sit in front of you for, and write on a piece of paper. But, it worked out. It meant it was AI proof. And I'm encouraging the students to use AI as much as they can to help. And they go, we couldn't use it here. It wasn't able to come up with a very good criteria. It came up with some points, but it wasn't, it couldn't evaluate the tools. And then they do it, and then they write, and then the tool that they recommend, they write an instruction manual on how to do that. And, AI is not so good with giving feedback on visuals, so it can't really give very good feedback. So I'm very much in the loop there, giving them feedback on the visual aspect of the instruction manual. But they are getting help, and they're collaborating with it in the way that they will be doing in 6 months' time when they get a job and are working. So that's one course. But then, so that's a second year university course. Another course I do is first year academic writing EAP course, I guess. And yeah, that's slightly a bit more of a struggle, because it got to the stage where teachers and the administrators were so worried about students, outsourcing and offloading all the content to AI that it ended up being sort of really inauthentic writing tasks, where students are given an essay with a missing paragraph, and this is all on paper, and they're given an essay with a missing paragraph, then they're given 2 short texts, and then they must integrate the 2 writing tasks into the essay. And it's like, gosh, this is so inauthentic. This is not what people do in real life. And it's because of the AI, trying to AI proof it. They went on and on and on, taking more and more steps to try and AI proof it. And it just became more and more inauthentic. So that's why I get my guys to write it using a framework where it's transparent and I can see what they're doing. And that's the way I think, we need to do it. If something needs to be done in class on paper, that's fine. Do it. And as you say, it gives students a break from using AI all the time, using technology all the time. But also the thought patterns are slightly different, using paper and pen and paper. It's slightly different thought processes going on, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So my take on this is just get rid of the final exam. I mean, trying to have exams and tests under weird conditions just don't really work. Just get their students to write 2 essays. That will be better.
I mean, you mentioned an AI-proof assessment, so that's I'll definitely stick a flag in that time code. But it boils down to a series of trade-offs, isn't it? As I think many have pointed out in the past, and we're at a stage where we are just deciding what to trade off and for what.
No, I was just going to say, but I don't mean to sound negative or pessimistic. I'm quite optimistic about it. I think, and as I said, at the IELTS conference in Brighton, people were looking at good ways to use it, and people are okay with the fact that sometimes students are going to misuse AI, and we can't prove it. We can't do anything about it. So there's no point, losing any sleep over it. There's not a lot you can do about it. You can try and get students to understand the purpose of why they're here and what they want to learn. If they want to learn something, but the reality is, a lot of students are there just to get a piece of paper, and as fast as possible, and get out and get a job. And that's the way, And as you say, there's different pressures. Students have sponsors and parents, and whatever. And great GPAs at my university. We have grade point averages that they need to keep up for certain things. Pressure on. And then they might have 5 assignments due on the same day, and boom, gosh, there's this thing here that will create my assignment for me. It's like, wow, I wish I had that when I was a student. I would have been using it all the time.
Yeah, it is interesting to reflect how we would have reacted.
But I think I'm positive about it. I think, we're going to keep working through it. And there's, even when AI agents become do more and more things in education, and our role maybe becomes less and less and less, I'm still, positive about, that education will change, it will adapt. And I'm interested to see what the Calm TED Institute, I'm really interested to see what that's like, because he's adamant there's no lectures. There's no lectures on this in this university, and I kind of like the idea of that. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see what, how the future of, universities will be, and how they'll be shaped, and how long they'll last for, and the role of teachers, and what. I mean, I feel my role's totally changed from what it was 4 years ago. Massively changed.
Yeah. Well, this is it. It's one of the big questions on the pile, isn't it? What is the role of unis? What are we doing? And
well, in 5 years,
6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. On that note, thank you, Peter. That's been amazing.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed that. Thanks a lot.